Hi, What the HealthTech listeners. This is the podcast where we tackle some of the trending topics, best practice, and general ideas and trends that are going on within the health and social care. I'm your host this week, Paul Johnson. This week, we're speaking to Hannah Wilkinson, who has recently joined Radar Healthcare as Head of People and Culture. Throughout this episode, we're going to talk about positive culture and the important part that plays in recruitment throughout the healthcare industry. And with ongoing challenges, recruiting carers and NHS workers, for example, we think this is the right time to tackle this subject. Hannah has spent her career in HR with a range of different industries, more recently working within the veterinary industry for 4 years, where there has been an ongoing recruitment crisis due to vets and nurses leaving the profession because of high demands within the role. So something I think that resonates with the health and social care. Recruitment and retention were always a top focus, along with well-being, work-life balance, standout benefits, and being an employer of choice. Outside of work, Hannah loves to travel and has a passion for transformational coaching. Easy for me to say. Hannah, welcome to What the HealthTech.
Thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Fantastic. Let's start with culture.
Yeah.
How important do you think it is to create that positive culture in the workplace, and in particular within the health and social care arena?
Yeah, so important. So as you've already introduced, I am Head of People and Culture at Radar now. It's something I'm really passionate about. We are at the moment, I'm sure many people have heard this or seen it in the news, but we are living through a period called the Great Resignation. So a lot of employees are leaving their jobs, even with no jobs to go to. And yeah, it's very much a candidates market out there at the moment. I think things are shifting, and they have been shifting for a while, but especially more so probably because of what we've been through for the last few years. And a job isn't just a job anymore. A job is, you want to come to work, you want to be in a positive, collaborative, inclusive culture. You want to enjoy being at work, enjoy working with your team and for the leaders that you work for. So yeah, it's really, really important. Like I say, it is a candidates market out there. And I think having a positive culture from a business perspective, it can be your unique selling point. It can give you that competitive edge. And I think, relating that back to health and social care, it's a lot of the roles within that industry are very difficult roles. There can be really tough days. There can be a lot of compassion fatigue. There can be just a lot going on, again, especially in the last few years. So as employers, we should be doing everything that we can to make the workplace a great place to be.
Yeah, I suppose, as you say there, such challenging, demanding roles within healthcare, and I suppose those challenges are going to be wherever you go. So yeah, culture is even more important. And
yeah,
do you see that, if I'm a candidate and I'm looking to go and work, I'm a nurse and I've got options, which I invariably will have, where do you see my first impression of culture? And from a recruiter perspective, how do you see that from your perspective, how you get that across?
So I think there's lots of different avenues you could explore, but something that I think is really key to note is that you could have, as a business, the best culture. You could have a really engaged, happy, positive workforce and people that love coming to work because of X, Y, and Z. But like you say, if you're not putting that out there, if the candidates can't see that, if you're that nurse that's looking for a change, if it's not out there for people to see, then it's not going to help you in that respect, is it? So I think getting it through on your job ads, putting your values on there, putting an explanation of your culture, maybe some anonymous quotes from employees that are genuine, getting your social media, depending on the nature, if you have social media, depending on the nature of the business. Because I know, for example, most businesses have social media now, don't they? Even NHS and public sector. But yeah, making sure that you're not just marketing to your customers or clients or patients, but you're marketing as well to potential candidates, showing what it's like to work there. Reviews on things like Glassdoor, really important. And probably the most powerful is word of mouth. So having something like a team referral scheme in place so that if your nurses and doctors or social care workers, whoever it is that work for you currently, love working for you, get them to tell their friends in the industry, get them to sing your praises, or provide them such a great employee experience that they do that naturally, and that will follow as well. That will spread. And yeah.
Yeah, no, I suppose it's like anything, that it's a little bit like TripAdvisor. You get a very real experience, or you certainly feel that. Whereas if you look on the website of you can think, wow, that looks an amazing place. And then when you read the reviews, so I suppose it's
human nature, isn't it? I mean, me as a consumer, if I'm looking to buy something, I'm probably an influencer's dream, because as soon as I see somebody that maybe I follow on social media, or somebody that I know and trust likes, a product or rave about a product, I want to buy it, or it confirms to me that I'm going to give this a try. So I think the same very much applies to the recruitment market. And if you know that there are people out there that are genuinely waking up in the morning happy to go to work, excited to go to work because of the culture they're going into, then of course you're going to want a piece of that, aren't you? Well, I would, as a candidate.
No, most definitely. Have you seen some great examples where people and culture have been, the front and centre and within organisations? Yeah,
so there's lots of big examples out there. So Netflix and some of the really big companies, but also lots of the smaller companies, I think, are doing it really well now. I think a lot of companies are moving. It depends on what culture you have, what culture you want. But for example, a lot of companies now are moving to a more flexible way of working, which is in part, we haven't really had a choice because of COVID. But for example, where I worked before, we put a really big emphasis on, we had a family culture. So we put a really big emphasis on the fact that we were formed as a family business. We weren't for the last few years because the business was acquired, but that remained as part of our culture. So we had a lot of, a majority of our workforce were parents or carers. So we made sure that we had flexible working. We had a lot of part-time employees. We did even small things like sending Easter eggs to our employees' children at Easter, with their name on it from Thorntons or whatever it might be. Things like that are small little things, but they build into the culture. They pay dividends compared to, I know salary is still important and then your benefits package and everything like that, but taking the action that is in line with your culture is really important. And I've listened to a few podcasts as well in terms of about different smaller companies that have built really good cultures. And some of the companies, for example, in the Sunday Times Best 100 companies, some really brilliant examples in there as well of just people that are getting it really right, and it shows their churn rate is low. People are raving about them. Their reviews on Glassdoor and everything like that are just absolutely brilliant as well. It
doesn't surprise me, but you can certainly see that some of those smaller gestures and that general engagement goes a long way, and almost people do start to look at the culture as opposed to their benefits and package, as it were.
Yeah.
Sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, I think that those little things are the things that, and from my perspective as being someone that's organised those or implemented that, I'd see the feedback and everything, but also on the other end, as somebody who's received a bunch of flowers on a Friday, thank you for doing this, or some brownies in the post, that's the thing you talk about when when you're having dinner that night or that weekend when you meet up with family or friends. That's the kind of thing that sticks with you and you remember, as opposed to the annual pay rise or whatever it might be. Both are important, but there are really simple things you can do there that can have a massive impact.
Mm-hmm. I know you mentioned about your passion about well-being, and again you mentioned about almost the crisis that we're facing, because lots of things, when we look at the pandemic, the recovery, the general pressures on health and social care across the whole arena, look at staff shortages, unplanned absences, means that there's a greater pressure on those that are in work and trying to deliver that service with less people.
Yeah.
How do you see, in terms of burnout, and how, what should we be doing to look out for it? How can we support it, and how can we prevent it, and, and really help people on that journey?
Yeah, so again, I think for the last few years working in the veterinary industry, this is something that was one of our biggest problems, because we were short-staffed, and it's a high-pressure job, as it will be in health and social care, and as many other careers are. You need to bring your full self to work. You need to be, it's life or death. You're performing surgery on pets, on animals. You need to be there. You need to be ready to work and in a good headspace to work. And yet, having a lack of staff, having people walking out or being low on numbers has a big impact on that. So the really obvious thing is making sure that whoever it is that's responsible for it is doing everything that they can on the recruitment front, being innovative, being proactive, being efficient on the recruitment front to ensure that we're filling those positions. But in the meantime, it is about looking after your current teams. So you can only work with what you've got. I know there are means out there of getting locums in and things like that, but if you haven't got the people in place, you can't expect a team that used to be a team of 10, that's now a team of 7, to be doing the work of 10 people. And the minute that you put that expectation on them, that's where you're going to have more of a turnover. You're going to have other people saying, do you know what, it's not worth it. We had to really put this at the top of our agenda, because we had obviously we all went through the pandemic, and we had times where we had a lot of our teams furloughed, and then moving on from that, there's just been a lot of turnover. A lot of people were leaving the profession. A lot of people were experiencing burnout, experiencing mental health illness because of the pressures of the job and the long hours and everything they'd gone through. So I think being innovative with things like, okay, you have to deal with the cards that you've been dealt, but what can we do to look after these people? What can we give back to make sure that if things are getting really bad, if they're coming in today to half the team have called in sick, or something's gone on, or something unexpected, how can we make work as enjoyable as possible, and reduce that pressure on them? So things like, we put in place things like wellbeing days. So making sure that if someone's had 2 weeks of being really short-staffed and they've really worked their socks off and done overtime and things like that, that they're off for a day next week, no questions asked, go and spend it doing what you want to do. Team building things, getting the team together. So in the pandemic, that wasn't always an option, but things like in the work environment, we would, for 2 hours, and we might have to split that into 2 teams because there's still a service to provide, of course, but we might split into 2 teams and have like a Mario Kart tournament, or get dominoes in, or have like a crafts afternoon. Things like that, they sound so, they can sound a bit gimmicky, and especially if you're quite stressed, but the feedback we got was just ridiculous, of people just saying it was just nice to be with my colleagues and not be talking about work, and just to relax for a couple of hours in work time. And yeah, making sure that if you have the budget and if you have the opportunity to implement benefits and things like that, and or improve benefits, enhance benefits, that you focus on something that is to do with mental well-being, and whether that's an employee assistance program, any kind of health insurance or cash plans, so that if people do get to a point where they're burning out, they're stressed, they've had a lot on, there are things there as well to be reactive with it. So whether that's therapy or counselling, different self-care tools, different workshops and webinars they can go on to learn about journaling or meditation or whatever it might be, looking at the whole picture and remembering that people are humans before they're employees or nurses or doctors or whatever it might be.
Yeah, something I picked up then when you said is, because of some of these roles and the responsibility, you said you have to bring your whole self.
Yeah.
So do you see that there is a responsibility on employers to beyond the workplace? So people, so I brought my whole self to and I've had a really hectic, shift that might have been extending for 24, 36 hours in some cases.
Yeah.
I've then got to go home and then maintain. How do you see the responsibility of the employer when the person's left the workplace?
Yeah, so I think, making sure that they get that protected time when they're away from work, I think is really important as well. So setting boundaries, ensuring that you're recognising if somebody has worked more than, they would usually work, or they've had extremely high pressures, making sure that we're recognising that and we're not adding additional pressures. But also in terms, just on the topic of bringing your whole self to work, that goes beyond just creating a nice positive environment to work in. all workforces will be made up of completely different backgrounds and different people from different walks of life and different interests, different hobbies, different beliefs. And it's making sure that first and foremost, the culture that you want to create, or the culture that you strive to create, is an inclusive culture. So it means, so you might be somebody that, for example, at the moment we're in Ramadan, aren't we? So that, if you have people within your company, who are currently going through Ramadan, making sure that as a company you adapt, like you account for that, because that is probably going to impact how they would usually work. If they're not eating or drinking through the day and then eating at night, can you make adjustments? Can you make in order to still get the job done? Are there adjustments you can make for people because of their life outside of work that means they can bring their whole selves to work and they can still be there and be their best selves?
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. Again, picking up on what you said, everybody's human, but everybody's different. So I suppose it's just as important not to have a fit all solution. It's being accommodating to culture, circumstance, role, many different factors.
Yeah, definitely.
So I suppose it's very easy to say that we're going to implement a positive culture, and people are going to go through this change process and make a conscious decision. What would you see as the biggest challenges for an organisation that wants to make a change or bring about, reinforcing their positive culture? And any tips for people going through that?
So I think, we've recently attended a CPD event together, haven't we, based around this. And something that I took away from that, which I hadn't really looked at it in that way before, was that you aren't going, so if you're making a change in your culture, then chances are, because hopefully it's to improve the culture, you maybe have recognised that something needs to change or something needs to adapt, or maybe the business is growing, or whatever the reason might be, a change needs to be made. With any change, you're not going to please everybody. But I think what's really important from a business perspective, from a leader perspective, is first of all, getting feedback, getting, everybody bought in. So you can't, and I don't know, this is my opinion, and I think this came through the other week when we did that CPD, but it's no good creating a culture based on one person's views. So yourself, for example, as a business owner, saying, right, this is what I think the culture should be, this is it, this is what we're going to do, because you have X number of other people there that might not fit. Obviously, you do have to come to a solution, and you've got to come to an outcome with it, but get feedback, let your employees have a voice, find out what makes them tick, what motivates them, what they enjoy, what they would love in a workplace. Secondly, communicate the whole way through. So make sure that people are, they know what's going on, they're up to date with everything that's going on. And finally, I think going back to what I learned at that CPD event is that you aren't going to please everybody. And chances are, if it's a change, you will have maybe a small percentage of people that are quite resistant to that change. And it's human nature to focus on changing their mind and kind of forget about everybody else that's jumping on board and are really championing the new changes that are coming into place. And also there's people in the middle that are just going with it and kind of seeing, and they'll make their mind up once they're there. Focusing too much attention on that smaller proportion can really take away from the overall, what you're trying to achieve. I think that was a really good lesson that I learned recently, is that move in the direction that the collective wants to move in. Don't ignore those people that are struggling with it, but communicate with them, let them know why the changes are being made, keep them involved, try and keep them bought in. But unfortunately, there isn't, like, say, a one size fits all. You aren't going to have the perfect culture that every single person is aligned with, but the chances are the culture that you've chosen to strive for is made up of all your different people. And then moving forward, when you're bringing new people in, make it part of the recruitment process. So you know from day one that our company culture and our values align with your personal values and, the culture that you would love to work in. And then hopefully you're always going to have people join in and wanting to go on that same, or maintain that same culture.
Yeah, I picked up, similar powerful message being on the same course, which was those detractors can very quickly become advocates and champions. So, once they understand the benefits to them. I think as well, just to kind of something I remember from the session, which I felt was a really important message, which was, I don't know if you recall, but there was an image of a plant pot that was fallen over.
Yeah.
And so one of the facilitators and speakers was an NHS trust and had been brought in to help them implement a change. And the story being that he was sat outside waiting to see the chief exec of an NHS trust. And there was a plant pot in the corridor and it was laid on its side, a little bit of soil spilt out. And he watched half a dozen people go into the chief exec's office and at times stepping over the plant pot. Now, it became representative of the culture because it was saying that there are things that are accepting of things that aren't acceptable.
Yeah.
You know, and I think, again, it's to get your views on how we monitor not only where we currently are, but if we are in a change program, how are we measuring that success and that we are genuinely picking up and driving in the direction that we want?
Yeah, definitely. I think just quickly going back to that is something, a phrase that's always stuck with me in my professional and my personal life is how you do one thing is how you do everything. So you can't, as a business, you can't profess to have this fantastic culture that everybody mucks in and everybody's, whatever it might be, but not, then in a different circumstance, completely go against that. It's got to be something that's intrinsic. It's got to be something that is how you behave on a daily basis when nobody's watching. So yeah, I think that was a really powerful story, wasn't it? But in terms of measuring and understanding, I think it's an ongoing thing, isn't it? It's not, for an organisation, for example, that recognises something needs to change here and takes the steps and does everything right to change those things and to implement the culture that they want and that the team wants and to really get that right is brilliant. But it doesn't stop there because it's a fragile thing, isn't it? All it can take is, a change in the stage of the business, for example, that can have an impact, or it can be a personnel change. There could be a few people, a few key, really positive culture champions leave and a few people join and we've lost that, or it could be a change in leadership or whatever it might be that happens in businesses day to day. It has to be continually monitored. It has to be, you need feedback, you need, surveys, or a bit like in marketing, is it an NPS, a net promoter score? Yep. You need something like that essentially internally to find out, touch points with your employees. Would you recommend other people working here? What do you love about your job? What would you change about your job? How you get, how's your line manager? How's their style? Because again, you could have a fantastic company culture, but if you have one manager that's managing a team of 15 and they aren't aligned with the culture, that's the experience that team have mainly day to day. That's their most frequent touch point, isn't it? So yeah, making sure that you're continually asking for feedback and then acting on the feedback when you get it. So if you get feedback, negative feedback or changes, if it is necessary and feasible, obviously not every you can't respond to every single piece of feedback as you may end up chasing your tail forever. But if there are messages coming through there and the things that can be changed and should be changed, then act on them. Don't just have a survey that kind of you get your results and it sits in a drawer. Act on the changes. And similarly, if you get really positive feedback, I think use that again, going back to recruitment. Get those messages out there in your recruitment. Get your employees to tell their friends. Get your employees to maybe put a social media post on about how fantastic it is to come to work at X, Y, and Z company. But yeah, making sure, like you say, it's a continual, it's adapting all the time, and it's as important on the agenda as the rest of the business objectives are, because it only takes something small to potentially change it or send it in a different direction.
Yeah, we were speaking earlier to Lee Williams, Chief Operating Officer and co-founder, and we were talking about culture, and, he highlighted, the company is nothing without the people. The product is nothing without the people. So, we have to put them front and centre, and it's certainly something as an SMT that it's top of our agenda. I think you've highlighted engagement and communication. Do you have any practical tips as to how people might go ensuring that is in place? Because it's clearly a key driver to making that change successful. Yeah,
so I think, like you say, and like I kind of said with the recruitment side, you could have the best culture or a lot of happy employees that think it's the best culture, but if if you haven't got a way to communicate and to or to understand that, or to, you know, the great initiatives that for potentially the SMT might be thinking up, if that isn't feeding down to the rest of the teams, then it isn't, you know, it's not, people aren't aware of it, are they? So it depends very much on the business. So for example, in a business like ours, where we're a tech company and we are mainly remote, we do have hybrid working, don't we? But it's not a kind of, we don't get big groups of people together very often, although we are putting that in place. You know, making sure that you've got those, you can replace those, what would have been water cooler moments, or, you know, moments at the kettle, if you can replace those by video chats, by, you know, different instant messaging services, by something that I'm really keen and want to implement is having like a HR system that's a bit like a social media. So where you've got somewhere where everybody knows to go, and it's where you shout out the things like, you know, this person's just joined us, and welcome them, and everybody can welcome them, or is this person's birthday, or well done to this person for doing this. Having somewhere where you can keep continually drip feeding the messages that you want to feed in there, and you can follow through on your, you know, on whatever it is that you profess to be as a culture. But obviously that would be different again for example, in a hospital setting or a care home setting where everybody's on site. I think making sure that you're bringing your teams together, you're having, you know, you're not just there to get a job done, do your own thing. I think bringing your teams together, again, another lesson from that event we went to is breaking bread, making sure that you as a leader, but also as your teams with each other, they break bread, they eat together, they have just a bit of time where it's not all work talk, and they, you know, they can just relax a little bit in each other's company, chat a bit more, be a little bit more candid, and that's really important as well. But yeah, communication, whatever method it is that works the best for the type of business you're in, making sure that it's constant, making sure that you're updating, that if things are changing, people know, and that, yeah, there's no uncertainty, then build that trust and maintain it.
Yeah. I suppose from your perspective then, you know, around, you know, the positive culture, and what would be your top 3 things that you would, you know, advise, be your recommendation for any organisation thinking about, you know, a change or bringing about positive culture? And I suppose equally importantly, how would you migrate that into the recruitment process so it becomes a part of that as well? Okay,
so because I feel like I've probably covered a few of these points already, but I'll just maybe touch back on them and just sure. So I think, like I say, the feedback thing is really important. I think, and as an employee going into work, whatever role it is that you might do, wherever you sit in that business, whatever department it is, feeling like you've got a voice and you've got the opportunity to impact decisions. You know, you recruit people into your business for a reason. Everybody's got different talents, different skills, different backgrounds, different qualifications, whatever that might be. Utilize that. Allow your employees to have a voice and to feel like they can influence whatever it might be, giving them that voice and asking for feedback, and similarly asking for feedback on how we're doing as a, you know, it's a 2-way relationship. How are we doing as an employer? What can we improve? Making sure you get that feedback, and then, you know, just to kind of, I know I mentioned this earlier, but then using that feedback in terms of making changes, and going back to recruitment, using it for the recruitment process. If you've got fantastic feedback, share it, obviously with people's consent or anonymous or whatever that might be, but share it. Secondly, I think recognition. So recognising hard work and rewarding it, and also recognising loyalty, recognising people's personal, you know, life events, birthdays, weddings, whatever it might be. As we said earlier, they can be a really small, it seems like a simple thing, or, you know, quite a low cost thing, to be honest, but that can really make somebody's day. If, for example, somebody's going through a difficult circumstance in their home life, you know, or a health issue, for example, those are the things, in my experience, that stick with somebody. That the fact that when they had this diagnosis, or they went through that divorce or whatever it was, that they had a bunch of flowers or a box of cupcakes turn up from, you know, their team, their family at the business, and just say, you know, we're thinking of you, we're here if you need you, here if you need us. That I think is really important. So recognition, and, you know, going one step further than that, if you can have a a recognition scheme or something in place where it becomes part of, it's not just about management and the business recognizing bits and bobs. Get your employees to recognize each other. So an easy way that's meaningful to make sure those thank yous are continually happening. So whenever somebody steps out and helps somebody or whatever it might be, that we're fostering a culture of people saying thank you and recognizing their colleagues for the great things that people do for each other day in, day out anyway. And then finally, again, it's one I've already mentioned, but remember that your employees are humans before they're anything else. And I guess that I've covered that a little bit already just then as well, in terms of people have, life is a weird and wonderful thing, isn't it? And I think we're all on a spectrum of different stages of mental health, different life events going on, different stresses outside of work, different things, careers. People want to, not everybody, but some people want to come into a company and progress and grow and develop and upskill. And some people want to come into a company and become really good at that job and stay stable and do that. But recognize that everybody is different. Everybody is from probably a different background, different life experiences. Remember that they are humans first. And if you can foster and maintain a culture where they feel like they can come in and bring their whole selves to work and bring all of that with them, but they feel supported to then still do their job. And I'm in a people role, so obviously I will be biased, but in my opinion, that's just as important, if not more important, than the rest of the business objectives that you need to get you there. Because if they aren't able to come into work, or they come into work and they are not able to, they're not supported with whatever it is that's going on, then, your customers aren't going to be served, efficiently or as well as they could be. It's not going to translate all the way through that service, is it, or your patients or whatever it might be. So just remembering that, yes, there are certain things you've got, there are always going to be objectives and there are going to be certain business needs that you need to meet. But if you can satisfy that first, you will get people coming in who are motivated and committed and wanting to do the best for the business.
Brilliant. I mean, what three great things, and I think if you had them, as your cornerstone underpinning, your culture, that feedback, as you mentioned, is a two-way thing.
Yeah.
As much as receiving feedback, you want to provide feedback.
Yeah.
I mean, recognition. I hadn't really occurred to me that sometimes it is encouraging fellow workers and colleagues to recognize each other. I think that's a really great one. And then people, recognizing that people are different and unique, and therefore ensuring that you're set up to support in whatever shape or form that is.
Definitely. Like going back to the recruitment side, it's not enough anymore and it should have never been enough, but it's not enough anymore to have to offer the going salary and statutory holidays. You've got to, especially in the market we're in at the moment, but moving forward, we've got to show people why if you can choose out of 10 companies, why us? Because we might all offer the same salary, the same amount of holidays, some great little benefits here and there, but why us? And we, as humans, most people spend a majority of their time at work. It's a huge part of your human experience, isn't it? So why not create a place where you enjoy going in? Yes, you've got to go in and get the job done, but you enjoy it, and you get a lot of satisfaction from the people you work with and the people you work for, and the product or the service or the care that you're providing to your customers or patients. It's really, I think potentially sometimes maybe that gets forgotten because there's so many other things to focus on, isn't there? Yeah. So really important.
Brilliant. Something that we like to ask all of our visitors and speakers is that within your career, is there a standout moment? If it's something funny, that you can be fun, it's touching, emotive, whatever it might be, can you call upon something within that kind of people and culture within your career that kind of resonates and always comes back to you?
So I had prepared for this question as what the HealthTech moment, and because I'm only, as you said earlier, I'm 4 weeks into the HealthTech industry, so I don't have one. But now you've thrown me a curveball, so I'm not really prepared for.
I suppose even within your career, I mean, it's people and culture. are the foundations of any organisation. So maybe calling upon that.
One that jumps to mind, it's more of a touching one, I guess, but I guess it does underpin everything we've talked about today. So without breaking any confidentiality, so I won't mention company names or people's names or anything like that, but we in a previous company had one of our team members who hadn't actually been with us for that long were diagnosed with cancer and went through a really, really difficult time in their lives. And for me, so this is, I guess, this might be a bit of a somber note to end the podcast on, but this is something that stuck with me in my career, is that when I left that company, they reached out to me and just said something along the lines of, and I won't go into details, but essentially the premise was, thank you so much for how you and the company handled X, Y, and Z that went on. That to me, like, you will never understand how important and how much that changed my whole like situation at the time, and how grateful I will be forever. And for that, it is something I think that will stick with me forever, because it wasn't about, we didn't do anything special or anything, but it was about the care that was shown from, they were very much seen as a human going through a really, really difficult and life-altering period in their life. They were very much, everything else was forgotten in terms of they're a human going through something and we care about them. And the fact that, this wasn't just from me, this was from senior management and from the business and all the different kind of their line manager and everything like that. The fact that translated so well, and that when they look back at their period in their life, they had such a good experience on the work front, which can obviously add an additional stress because not all companies are like that. I think that will stay with me forever. I don't really know if that answered the question. I think it was a bit off topic, but it is something that I think underpinning what we've talked about today, that's so important, that you can leave. That person in 20 years from now isn't going to remember what their salary was at the time or what bonus they got at Christmas. They're going to remember something like that, and it's really important, I think. Yeah, no,
I 100% agree. And sadly, we again won't go into details, but we have a couple of people that are having some challenges. And what impressed me and gave me faith that we do have a positive culture is, first and foremost, it has just been about the person, how we can support that person in their time of need, and with no thought to work or anything. It is, how are we going to support this person? And they are friends.
Yeah.
And I got a beautiful message from one of the person's wife, just as a thank you and a similar kind of thing, and it kind of reinforced it for me as well. So thank you for that. Hannah, thank you so much. Some real great insights there. Certainly, I'm looking forward to how we applied them and, further reinforce what we're trying to do, and hopefully listeners and people considering this can take them away as well. Thanks for everybody for listening this week. Next week, we have Mark Fooster, Head of Product at Radar Healthcare. He'll be joining us as we look at a recent roundtable event where with the Digital Health Rewired event and the importance of adoption of innovation within the NHS, something I was part of, and it was, again, a very emotive conversation, so it'd be great to see and hear Mark's feedback. Don't forget to rate and subscribe where you get your podcasts. And if you have any questions for Hannah or any of our other guests, then please email whatthehealthtech@radarhealthcare.com. Thank you.